Chapter 29. Hezekiah began to reign when he was 25 years old, and he reigned 29 years in Jerusalem. And his mother's name was Abiah, the daughter of Zechariah. And he did that which was right in the eyes of the Lord, according to all that David his father had done. He, in the first year of his reign, in the first month, opened the doors of the house of the Lord, and repaired them. And he brought in the priests and the Levites, and gathered them together into the broad place on the east. And he said unto them, Hear me, you Levites, now sanctify yourselves, and sanctify the house of the Lord, the God of your fathers, and carry forth the filthiness out of the holy place. For our fathers have acted treacherously, and done that which was evil in the sight of the Lord our God, and have forsaken him, and have turned away their faces from the habitation of the Lord, and turned their backs. Also they have shut up the doors of the porch, and put out the lamps, and have not burned incense, nor offered burnt offerings in the holy place unto the God of Israel. Wherefore the wrath of the Lord was upon Judah and Jerusalem, and he hath delivered them to be a horror, an astonishment, and a hissing, as you see with your eyes. For lo, our fathers have fallen by the sword, and our sons and our daughters and our wives are in captivity for this. Now it is in my heart to make a covenant with the Lord, the God of Israel, that his fierce anger may turn away from us. My sons, be not negligent, for the Lord hath chosen you to stand before him, to minister unto him, that you should be his ministers, and offer unto him. Then the Levites arose, Maachat, son of Amasai, and Joel, the son of Azariah, of the sons of the Kohathi, and of the sons of Merari, Kish, the son of Abdi, and Azariah, the son of Yehalelel, and of the Gershoni, Joach, the son of Zimmah, and Eden, the son of Joach, and of the sons of Elisaphan, Shimri, and Yeiel, of the sons of Asaph, Zechariah, and Mattaniah, and of the sons of Kaman, Yeiel, and Shemai, and of the sons of Yedutun, Shemaiah, and Uzziel. And they gathered their brethren, and sanctified themselves, and went in according to the commandment of the king by the words of the Lord, to cleanse the house of the Lord. And the priest went into the inner part of the house of the Lord to cleanse it, and brought out all the uncleanliness that they found in the temple of the Lord into the court of the house of the Lord. And the Levites took it, to carry it out abroad to the brook of Kidron. Now they began on the first day of the first month to sanctify. And on the 8th day of the month came they to the porch of the Lord, and they sanctified the house of the Lord in 8 days. And on the 16th day of the first month they made an end. Then they went into Hezekiah the king within the palace, and said, We have cleansed all the house of the Lord, even the altar of burnt offerings, with all the vessels thereof, and the table of showbread, with all the vessels thereof. Moreover, all the vessels which King Achaz in his reign did cast away when he acted treacherously, have we prepared and sanctified, and behold, they are before the altar of the Lord. Then Hezekiah the king arose early, and gathered the princes of the city, and went up to the house of the Lord. And they brought 7 bullocks, and 7 rams, and 7 lambs, and 7 he-goats, for a sin offering, for the kingdom, and for the sanctuary, and for Judah. And he commanded the priests, the sons of Aaron, to offer them on the altar of the Lord. So they killed the bullocks, and the priest received the blood, and dashed it against the altar. And they killed the rams, and dashed the blood against the altar. They killed also the lambs, and dashed the blood against the altar. And they brought near the he-goats, the sin offering, before the king and the congregation, and they laid their hands upon them. And the priest killed them, and they made a sin offering with the blood upon the altar, to make atonement for all Israel. For the king commanded that the burnt offering and the sin offering should be made for all Israel. And he set Levites in the house of the Lord, with cymbals, and with psalteries, and with harps, according to the commandment of David, and of Gad the king's seer, and Nathan the prophet, for the commandment was of the Lord by his prophets. And the Levites stood with the instruments of David, and the priests with the trumpets. And Hezekiah commanded to offer the burnt offerings upon the altar. And when the burnt offering began, the song of the Lord began also, and the trumpets, together with the instruments of David the king of Israel. And all the congregation prostrated themselves, and the singers sang, and the trumpeters sounded, and all this continued until the burnt offering was finished. And when they made an end of the offering, the king and all that were present with him bowed themselves and prostrated themselves. Moreover, Hezekiah the king and the princes commanded the Levites to sing praises unto the Lord with the words of David and of Asaph the seer. And they sang praises with gladness, and they bowed their heads and prostrated themselves. Then Hezekiah answered and said, Now you have consecrated yourselves unto the Lord. Come near and bring sacrifices and thank offerings unto the house of the Lord. And the congregation brought in sacrifices and thank offerings. As many as were of willing heart brought burnt offerings. And the number of the burnt offerings which the congregation brought was 60 bullocks, 100 rams, and 200 lambs, and all these were for a burnt offering to the Lord. And the consecrated things were 600 oxen and 3,000 sheep. But the priests were too few, so that they could not flay all the burnt offerings. Wherefore their brethren the Levites did help them, till the work was ended, until the priests had sanctified themselves. For the Levites were more upright in heart to sanctify themselves than the priests. And also the burnt offerings were in abundance, with the fat of the peace offerings and the drink offerings for every burnt offering. So the service of the house of the Lord was firmly established. And Hezekiah rejoiced, and all the people, because of that which God had prepared for the people. For the thing was done suddenly. All right, let's go back up to verse 1. And let's call to mind yesterday, the last chapter we had Achaz. And Achaz didn't do very good. Achaz built Balaam, and Achaz did wickedly, and Achaz did all manner. He burned his sons in the valley of Hinnom. And we know this is not something at all tolerated, to cause your children to pass through the judgments, even of these naughty gods that God gave all the other nations to rule over them. And they had come against Achaz, and they'd come against the house of the king, and God had sent the Philistines and Aram and Assyria, and God had sent Israel even against them. And they had slain them, and they had brought a great victory against them. For God, we'll find out, God was punishing. This was punishment, and this is not something we would like to see. It would be better if you would turn and listen, that God would take away. And we're going to find out, see, that God is merciful. God's always trying to, there's always a lesson. There's always a lesson to be learned, some understanding to understand that God punishes now for error. God punishes for trespass against the law. And he even punishes the king. He punishes everybody when they are in transgression. We're going to go ahead and pick it up in verse 1. Hezekiah, his son, is going to reign. Hezekiah began to reign when he was 25 years old, and he reigned 29 years in Jerusalem. And his mother's name was Abiah, the daughter of Zechariah. Now Hezekiah is going to begin to reign. Hezekiah are the strengths of God. He's the strengths of God. And he's going to begin to reign. He's 25 years old was he when he did begin to reign. 5, because there's grace. See, there's grace. And grace is like mercy. It's like a little pity. It's like to show some favoritism even. And 20 years old. 20, because it's redemption. That we can witness the law and the greater understandings even of old. That's the law. And when God judges according to the law, just like he said he would do. And he reigned 29 years in Jerusalem. 9, because there will be a harvest even. There's a harvest here. And in these 20 years, and that's that redemption of the greater understandings in Jerusalem. That's that place of peaceful teachings. And his mother's name, and that's his mother, or the understanding of his father, that which he come forth from, her name would be Abiah, and she's the daughter of Zechariah. And Abiah father is God. Father is God, or my father's God, the daughter of Zechariah, and that's the understanding of those that are remembered of God. And he did that which was right in the eyes of the Lord, according to all that David his father had done. And he did that which was right. And we'll find out all that is to turn from sin. Turn. And that's what he did. 3. And he, in the first year of his reign, in the first month, opened the doors of the house of the Lord and repaired them, because we know all cause had shut up the doors of the house of God, and he didn't let anybody go in or out. He had raised up these high places on every corner in Jerusalem, and had caused the people to go there and serve. But Hezekiah opened up the eyes, and opened up the doors of the house of God, and we'll find out in the first year of his reign. And that was the beginning of the greater understanding, even in his reign. And in the first month did he open the doors, and that is the beginning of this lesser light, because it's a lesser understanding. It's even a period of the moon. It's a lesser understanding. It's a light that God gives, an understanding that God gives. See, and it's just a little period of time. It just makes up a portion of a greater understanding. And he opened the doors of and that's to open where that was shut. See, the doors, that's that place where they go in and out of the house of God. 4. And he brought in the priests and the Levites and gathered them together into the broad place on the east. That broad place, that place that was widened, Rakab, on the east, that's where the sun comes up. That's the way of enlightenment. That's the way of understanding, even. Then when we look toward it, that morning sun comes from. He brought these priests. These are the ones that stand before God, the Levites, these that join. And 5, and he said to them, Hear me, you Levites, now sanctify yourselves and sanctify the house of the Lord, the God of your fathers, and carry forth the filthiness out of the holy place. And he tells the Levites and the priests that were there to listen. Listen to me, you that join. Now sanctify yourselves, and sanctify the house of God, the Lord. Sanctify yourselves, that means to prepare yourselves, to set yourselves aside, get prepared, clean yourself, wash yourself, and make ready for the house of God, and carry out the filthiness out of the temple, out of the holy place, because they had brought all manner of abomination in, and they had done greatly wickedness before God. It's documented. 6, For our fathers have acted treacherously, and done that which was evil in the sight of the Lord our God, and have forsaken him, and have turned away their faces from the habitation of the Lord, and turned their backs. For our fathers have acted treacherously, those that we come forth from, those that were here even the generation before, they have acted treacherously, and they have done wickedly, and they have done much evil, even in the sight of the Lord our God. And that's why we see the slow degradation of society continuing. See, it doesn't stop, because the generation before does nothing. And God has forsaken it, because why? They have turned away their faces from the habitation of the Lord. And that's from that place where God inhabits. That's the kingdom of God. That's the understanding of God. His knowledge and his wisdom. They give you in the beginning. We call it the law. See, and they've turned their backs. And they turned their backs on the law. That's why God says turn and return. You have to turn around from your wicked ways. See, that you've been taught that's acceptable, that's not acceptable unto God. We'll find the example. 7. Also they have shut up the doors of the porch, and put out the lamps, and have not burned incense, nor offered burnt offerings in the holy place unto the God of Israel. And they shut up the doors, that place where they went in and out, and of the porch. That porch was that thing that was attached to the gate. It was attached to the judgment. That's where guards stood, and the doorkeepers would stand, and they'd keep that door. And they put out the lamps, those that burnt that oil, that we could always see a light, an understanding from God, that oil burning. See, that's the fire that comes from the anointing oil. That's the olive. That's the law. See, the fire that comes from it's the judgment, and that's what was in that lamp. See, and that's what that represented. It'd better to burn there in the lamp, to burn here in the flesh. And they have burned incense nor burnt offerings into the holy place of the God of Israel. And they hadn't burned no incense. There was no prayers going to God. There was no burnt offerings in the holy place. That was to make atonement for the generation that was going astray. There was none of that going on, not for God. 8. Wherefore the wrath of the Lord was upon Judah and Jerusalem, and he hath delivered them to be a horror, an astonishment, and a hissing, as you see with your eyes. And that's why, see, the wrath of the Lord was upon Judah and Jerusalem. He had commanded them to not take these other gods, and they took these other gods and went greatly astray. These are praisings and that place of peaceful teachings. And he delivered them to be a horror, an astonishment, something you can make an example of, a hissing, something that you can just throw your nose up and say. Why? Because they turned from the Lord their God, and he made an example of them. And that's exactly what we would learn. 9. For lo, our fathers have fallen by the sword, and our sons and our daughters and our wives are in captivity for this. Our fathers have fallen by the sword. They've been taken in the battle. They could not fight against it. They had not enough understanding of the law. And we'll find out that comes from the generation before, not keeping the law, not teaching the law. Our sons and our daughters, those that go forth from us, our understandings. Our wives, those of our own understanding, are in captivity for this. We can't escape, see, because God had done it. 10. Now it is in my heart to make a covenant with the Lord, the God of Israel, that his fierce anger may turn away from us. And it was in the heart of Hezekiah, the strength of God, to make a covenant with the Lord, to make a covenant, this agreement. And we'll find out it's a peaceful agreement, and it's the agreement that's always been there, to keep that agreement. Not to make it, to keep it with the Lord, the God of Israel, that his fierce anger may turn, his wrath, his judgments may turn. Now, if you turn, they turn. See, it's an automatic thing. That's the way it works. 11. My sons, be not negligent, for the Lord hath chosen you to stand before him, to minister unto him, that you should be his ministers and offer unto him. My sons, these ones that go forth from, be not negligent, and this negligent is to, the word is shalah, and that's not, don't be misled, don't be misunderstood, see, don't get the wrong understanding, because God has chosen everyone who can hear to stand before him and to minister unto him, that you should be ministers and offer unto him these. And then the Levites, 12, arose, Machath the son of Masai, and Yoel the son of Atzariah, of the sons of the Kohathi, and of the sons of Merari, Kish the son of Abdi, and Atzariah the son of Yehalelel, and of the Gershoni, Yoach the son of Zimmah, and Eden the son of Yoach. And these would be the Levites that rose, those that were assembled, those that had joined, arose. Machath, he was the one that comes forth from Masai. And Machath is those that are wiped out. They are wiped out. These are the ones that are cleaned out, so to speak. They're cleaned out. He come forth from Amasai, and that's that burden, and those of the burden. That's those of the burden. And Yoel, he's the son of Atzariah. Yoel is that God's mighty one. God's mighty one. This one God's given strength to. God causes this. He come forth from Atzariah. That's the supported of God. That's the one that supports of God. God supports. He is the one that come forth from the Kohathi. That's those of the assembled, those of the assembly. And of the sons of Merari, that's those of bitterness, was Kish, the son of Abdi. And Kish is the snare. He is the snarer. He is the one that come forth from Abdi. And that's those that serve. And Atzariah, he would be the supported of God, the one that come forth from Yehalelel. Yehalelel, God makes known the mighty one, because God does make known the mighty one. God supports the mighty one. And of Gershoni, those that are exiled, Yoach, the son of Zimmah, and Yoach is God's brother. Yoach is God's brother. He is the one that comes forth from Zimmah. And that's the planner of devices. This one who, and to be God's brothers, mean to be of the same understanding of God. To have got the same understanding, to come from the same mother, see. And that's to be from one understanding in the beginning. And Yoach, he is the son of Zimmah. And Zimmah is that planner of devices. This one who has this understanding. And Eden is that all that pleasure, all that wonderfulness, all that pleasantness even. The one that comes forth from Yoach, that's God's brother, or the one who has the same understanding as God. 13, and the sons of Elitzaphan, Shimri, and Yeiel, and the sons of Atzaph, Zachariah, and Mattaniah, and these would be the ones that come forth from Elitzaphan. And Elitzaphan is that mighty one of the hidden treasure. He's the mighty one of something that's tucked away, it's stored up, it's waiting. Shimri and Yeiel, Shimri are those that of diligence, those that are ever searching, ever looking. Yeiel, those that were swept away by the mighty one. These are the ones that were swept away by the mighty one. We'll find out why. Because of the sons of Asaph, and these would be the sons of Asaph, who was the gatherer. That was Zachariah and Mattaniah, and that's those who remembered of God. And these were those that were gifted of God. God gifted them with this, and we know He bestowed it upon them. 14, and they're of the sons of Kaman. These would be the ones that come forth from Kaman. That's the faithful. Yeiel and Shimei. And Yeiel is those that were sustained of the mighty one. Those that whom the mighty one sustained. And Shemai is by a report, or this is something they've heard. And of the sons of Yedutun, Shemaiah and Uzziel. And Shemaiah these would be the sons of Yedutun, these ones that come forth from Yedutun. And Yedutun just means the act, it's praising. It's actually praising the Lord. Shemaiah is those that have heard of God, those that even heard God. And Uzziel, that's the strength of the mighty one. That is the strength of the mighty one to make an example, see, of this understanding of God. 15, and they gathered their brethren and sanctified themselves and went in, according to the commandment of the king, by the words of the Lord, to cleanse the house of the Lord. And all these that we've mentioned, they gathered their brethren, all these of the same understandings, and they sanctified themselves. They set themselves aside and cleansed themselves, make ready, prepare themselves, and went in according to the commandment of the king, by the words of God, by the words of the Lord, to cleanse the house of the Lord, to cleanse it out, and to make it clean, to make anew. We'll find out this is a new beginning. 16, and the priest went in unto the inner part of the house of the Lord to cleanse it, and brought out all the uncleanliness that they found in the temple of the Lord into the court of the house of the Lord. And the Levites took it to carry it out abroad to the brook of Kidron. And the priests, they would go in, they clean the inner part of the sanctuary. We know that was their portion. And they brought it out to the outer court, we'll find out. They brought it out into the court of the house. And there would be where the Levites would rule. And they would take it from there, and they would carry it out to the brook of Kidron. That's that place of darkness, and it's a big pit they used to throw everything in. It's a big gorge, so to speak. 17. Now they began on the first day of the first month to sanctify, and on the 8th day of the month came they to the porch of the Lord, and they sanctified the house of the Lord in 8 days, and on the 16th day of the first month they made an end. And they began to clean it on the first day of the month. That's the beginning of understanding of the first month. That's when beginning of the lesser light. That's this period of the moon, that lesser light that God given beginning to rule over the darkness, to sanctify it. And on the 8th day, that's this new beginning, even that portion of understanding that goes with it, of this month, that's that lesser light. Came they to the porch of the Lord, and they came to that place that was attached to judgment of God, and they sanctified the house of God in 8 days. And this would be because there's going to be a new beginning, even in understanding. God's going to make another example. And on the 16th day of the first month, they made an end. Now, this would be the 16th day. And that's 16. That's 10 and 6, because it's the law in the work of man. 6 days shall you do your work. Even this portion of understanding of the beginning of the lesser light, they made an end, and we'll find out, of cleaning the house of God, of making this new beginning, sanctifying it. 18. Then they went into Hezekiah the king within the palace, and said, We have cleansed all the house of the Lord, even the altar of burnt offerings, with all the vessels thereof, and the table of showbread, with all the vessels thereof. So when they get done, they go in and they tell Hezekiah, these are the strangers of God, he is the king. Now, and they say, We have cleansed the house of God, we have made ready, even the altar of burnt offerings. That's where they slay these things that have to pass through the fire to make atonement for, even, with all the vessels thereof, everything that goes with them. And the table of showbread, that's that which the showbread would set on, that table. It's where they turn. It's the law of God. It represents this which nourishes body and soul, with all the vessels thereof. 19. Moreover, all the vessels which King Achaz in his reign did cast away when he acted treacherously, have we prepared and sanctified, and behold, they are before the altar of the Lord. And moreover, all these vessels, vessel is something that contains, it is something that can hold something, which King Achaz in his reign did cast away when he acted. And we remember these, what Achaz did. That's the seized, the one, remember, God seized them, God took hold of them, punished them for what they did. Because, why, they acted treacherously, and he throwed away these vessels like they had no understanding in his time. Have we prepared, or they gathered back up and repaired these things and sanctified them, made them ready for the use of the house of God. They're set aside for a purpose. They have a purpose, and behold, they are before the altar of the Lord. And once again they sit there before this place where they slay. 20. Then Hezekiah the king arose early, and gathered the princes of the city, and went up to the house of the Lord. And Hezekiah the king gets up early in the morning. He gathers all the princes of the city, and they go up to the house of God. 21. And they brought 7 bullocks, and 7 rams, and 7 lambs, and 7 he-goats for a sin offering for the kingdom, and for the sanctuary, and for Judah. And he commanded the priests, the sons of Aaron, to offer them on the altar of the Lord. And they bring these offerings, we're going to find out. These 7 bullocks, 7 rams, 7 lambs, 7 he-goats, all for a sin offering for the whole kingdom. And that's for all of Israel. We'll find Hezekiah commands that it's for all the nation. These 7 bullocks, because these bullocks, they are to accomplish. The bullock is that which can go astray. It gets out, it causes damage, and that's what these young bullocks represent. And there were 7 of them. It's because it's to accomplish even this period of these young bullocks. And to these 7 rams, these 7, it's to accomplish those things that exalt themselves. These rams, these exalted ones. God does this. God uses as an example. These rams are the ones who have the horns, and those are things of strength, and they twist. See, they twist these understandings of God, and that's where they get their strength. And these 7 lambs represents the people. These ones that are of the lesser cattle, even, can be led easily, and this is to accomplish this for those lambs. And 7 he-goats. These 7 he-goats. The he-goat is that which is the word Sayer, and it refers to this covering of fear. This covering of fear, and that was that which hid them in the first place from their sin. And it was for a sin offering, and that was to make atonement for their sin. And it was for the kingdom, and for the sanctuary, and for Judah. And he commanded the priest of the sons of Aaron to offer them on the altar of the Lord. And he commands these priests, these are the ones that stand before God. These would be the sons of Aaron. That's the ones that come forth from Aaron. He's the light bringer. and they offer upon the altar of the Lord. 22. So they killed the bullocks, and the priest received the blood, and they dashed it against the altar. And they killed the rams, and dashed the blood against the altar. And they killed also the lambs, and dashed the blood against the altar. So they do, now according, they kill these bullocks. And these are to make atonement for these that have went astray, these that have got out and caused this damage now. And the priests receive the blood. They take these ones that stand before God, and we'll find out they dash it against the altar. It makes atonement. And they kill the rams. They do the same thing. This is those that exalted. It's to make atonement for those that have exalted themselves in the twisting of these understandings. We find it out. See, that's that generation that went astray. They followed after the Baalim, and they dashed the blood against the altar. That's to make atonement, because the blood God commanded that you pour it out. And they killed also the lambs, and these was to make atonement for those that of the lesser cattle, these that follow, and they dashed the blood against the altar. 23. And they brought near the he-goats for the sin offering before the king and the congregation, and they laid their hands upon them. Then they bring up these he-goats, and these he-goats, it was a long custom for what was known as the scapegoat, and this what they'd lay their hands on and cut him loose. But now they bring these he-goats, these Sair, these ones who are, because they do it out of fear, they do it out of the observance for the offering of the sin that they've committed against God, and make atonement for it. And they all lay their hands upon them, isn't it? And this is whatever work they had done. Their works were laid upon these he-goats, and this we'll find out. 24. And the priest killed them, and made a sin offering with their blood upon the altar, to make atonement for all Israel. For the king commanded that the burnt offering and the sin offering should be made for all Israel. Now these ones that stand before God, the priests, they kill them, these he-goats, and they make a sin offering to make atonement for. We'll find out. Make atonement. It's for the atonement. This blood, this which was supposed to be poured out on the ground, upon the earth, that's the flesh, and make atonement for. That's upon that altar. That's that place where they slay. See, unless it get loose into the earth, as it is, and slay there, to make atonement for all Israel. And this is to make atonement, to cleanse all Israel. That's those that contend with the Mighty One. For the king commanded that the burnt offering and the sin offering should be made for all Israel. And because Ezekiel had commanded that this burnt offering, that's that which passed through the fire, that's to make atonement for that last generation that didn't have understanding. It keeps that which is perpetual, and the sin offering, that's to make atonement for that which the sin, even that which they've done, should be for all Israel. 25. And he set the Levites in the house of the Lord with cymbals and psalteries and with harps, according to the commandment of David, and of Gad, and of the king seer, and of Gad the king seer, and Nathan the prophet, for the commandment was of the Lord by his prophets. And he sets the Levites in the house of God, just with the cymbals, the psalteries, and with the harps. And we remember these instruments. See, these instruments that were made to make these, to call to God's remembrance. See, the commandments of David. And that's that. David was that beloved. He's that chosen one. God's making an example of. It was done with understanding and knowledge. It was a blueprint handed out to David by the hand of God, by the work of God. And of Gad and the king seer. And Gad's that troop. He was the king seer. These ones who perceive. And Nathan, the prophet, that's the gift of the speaker. For the commandment was of the Lord. 26. And the Levites stood with the instruments of David, and the priests with the trumpets. And the Levites, that's those that join. They stand with the instruments of David, and that's those things that call to remembrance God and the work of God. And the priest with the trumpets, that's those shofars blowing the warning, sounding the warning, these that stand before God. 27. And Hezekiah commanded to offer the burnt offering upon the altar. And when the burnt offering began, the song of the Lord began, also the trumpets, together with the instruments of David, king of Israel. And Hezekiah commanded to offer the burnt offerings, those that going to make atonement. Those things that passed through the fire, that's the judgment of God. Upon the altar, that's the place where they were slain. And when the burnt offering began, when it all begins, we'll find out the song of the Lord begins. This music that goes before God. And they begin to sound the trumpets, those warnings. The priests do, those that stand before God. Together with the instruments of David, the king of Israel. And these instruments that would make that music, that would call to God's remembrance these judgments and that's promise, see, that he made. 28. And all the congregation prostrated themselves, and the singers sang, and the trumpeters sounded, and all this continued until the burnt offering was finished. And all the congregation, that's all those that are gathered, they prostrate themselves. That's a show of humility. And it's not just to bow down, it's to spread yourself totally out upon the ground. And the singers sang, and these are those that sing these songs before the Lord, and the trumpeters, those that give warning. And all of this continues until the burnt offering was finished, and that's to make atonement for that which is passed through the fire and judgment of God. 29. And they had made an end of the offering. The king and all that were present with him bowed themselves and prostrated themselves. And when it was all done, at the end of all of it, of making the offerings, that's make atonement for the nation, the king and all that were present, that were with him there, they bow themselves and prostrate themselves. They bow down and spread themselves out on the ground as a show of humility before God. 30. Moreover, Hezekiah the king and the princes commanded the Levites to sing praises unto the Lord with the words of David, and to Asaph the seer. And they sang praises with gladness, and they bowed their heads and prostrated themselves. Moreover, in addition, Hezekiah the king, he had commanded all the princes, those rulers, commanded the Levites to sing these praises and to keep this song going with the words of David. Those words that David had written down. We'll get into those as we go to Psalms. And he's the chosen one. And of Asaph, he was the seer. Those that perceive, Asaph's the gatherer. The gatherer, this one that perceives. And they sing these praises of gladness. And they bow their heads and they prostrate themselves, humble themselves before the Lord. Then Hezekiah answered and said, Now you have consecrated yourselves unto the Lord. Come near and bring sacrifices and thank offerings into the house of the Lord. And the congregation brought in sacrifices and thank offerings, as many as were of willing heart brought burnt offerings. Then Hezekiah said, Now you've consecrated yourselves. Now you've set yourselves aside unto the Lord. Come near and let's bring sacrifices of thanks and offerings. These are free will offerings, offerings of thanks to God, made willingly and freely from your own heart, to make atonement. The house of God and the congregation brought these sacrifices, these free will offerings, and as many as were of willing heart. See, that's of willing heart. Those that have this willing understanding would bring these burnt offerings, and that's this to make atonement for these that has passed through the judgment of God. 32. And the number of the burnt offerings which the congregation brought was 70 bullocks, and 100 rams, and 200 lambs. All these were for burnt offering to the Lord. And the number of these burnt offerings, this would be the reckoning of them, or the recording of them, the recount of them, of these burnt offerings. That's those things that make atonement for the judgment, which the congregation brought, was 70 bullocks, 70. Now, it's going to complete redemption. See, score is 20, and that 20 is 2 tens. That's to witness the law. That is redemption, see. And this is going to complete the redemption. It's 10 bullocks, and that's the law, see. It was for these bullocks, that's those that went astray, that got out and caused damage. It was 100, and 100 rams. This is the judgment of these rams, and those that have exalted themselves. They take up those places of rule, and they exalt themselves, and they take up and they twist these strengths of God, and we'll find out. 200 lambs. Now witness this judgment of the lambs, because these lambs are these ones who were led. They were the ones who were led astray. All these were for a burnt offering. That's to make atonement for those things that have passed through the judgment of God. 33, and the consecrated things were 600 oxen and 3,000 sheep. And these things that were consecrated, that's set aside. They got a different purpose. These are for a different understanding. That things were 600 oxen, because it's a work of man in judgment on these oxen. That's those that pull. That's those that are yoked and caused to pull. And these 3,000 sheep, because it's going to complete the fulfillment for the sheep. And that's that they can witness the law and the judgment of God. 34. But the priests were too few, so that they could not flay all the burnt offerings, wherefore their brethren, the Levites, did help them till the work was ended, and until the priests had sanctified themselves. For the Levites were more upright in heart to sanctify themselves than the priests. But the priests, now these ones that stand before God, there were too few. There just wasn't enough of them, so that they could flay all the burnt offerings. And this flay, and it's what this means, is to cut into strips, to cut into pieces all the burnt offerings, these things that were passed through the judgment, were wherefore their brethren the Levites did help them. And that's why the Levites, those that joined, did come to their help till the work was ended, till it was done, until the priests had sanctified themselves. And we'll find out, because all those that stood before God hadn't sanctified themselves at this point, hadn't set themselves aside for the purpose, of God. For the Levites were more upright in heart to sanctify themselves than the priests. And because the Levites, those that join, are a lot more willing, and this is upright in heart, to sanctify themselves than the priests were, those that stood before God. Because, they were weary. They were weary. They had seen this and many times before as a good start, and then it's not a good finish. And also, the burnt offerings were in abundance, that the fat of the peace offerings and the drink offerings for every burnt offering, so the service of the house of the Lord was firmly established. And also, it was because there were so many offerings. The burnt offerings, those things that had to pass through the fire because of the judgment of God to make atonement, for the sin, were in abundance. And with the fat of the peace offerings, this fat of the peace, this goodness, of these peace offerings, that's them free will offerings. And the drink offerings, that's those drink offerings, are those that we pour out before the Lord that go with the others. And that represents those understandings that have been poured out, because God's understanding is greater than all. And it's the law He gave you in the beginning for understanding, for every burnt offering. And these that would go with those offerings that pass through the fire. That's those judgments of God. So the service of the house of the Lord was firmly established. And that's what God's house is used for. It's to make atonement for these generations that go before, that have no understanding of God, that didn't get taught the law, that don't have an understanding, it has to be redone constantly, over and over and over, because God set it as an ordinance. 36, and Hezekiah rejoiced, and all the people, because of that which God had prepared for the people, for the thing was done suddenly. And Hezekiah rejoices, and all the people, because of that which God has prepared for the people. And God has prepared a place to make atonement for your sin, to make atonement for the generation that passes through the fire. It's God's law, it's God's knowledge, it's God's understanding, it's God's wisdom. It's the law, and you got to turn and return back to it. And we'll find out. God has the ability to do things suddenly, and this was done, and the people did rejoice greatly. We're going to move forward. Chapter 30, turn and return.